Hello, everyone. Welcome to Retention, Maximizing VISTA's Success and Satisfaction Throughout the Project Lifecycle, the second webinar in our new series for VISTA supervisors. My name is Lois Morgan. I'm from Bank Street College of Education in New York City, and I'll be your host for this webinar. We have a team supporting us today, and to start, I want to welcome you to Eric Powell from CNCS. Take it away, Eric.
Welcome to the second webinar in our VISTA Webinar Supervisor Series. On behalf of the Corporation for National and Community Service, celebrating 20 years of service, and the VISTA program about to celebrate its 50th anniversary, we thank you very much for serving in the important role of a VISTA supervisor. We also appreciate your interest in these webinars, which are designed for you, current and incoming VISTA supervisors. On vistacampus.gov, you'll see a full schedule of monthly webinars that we put together for supervisors to register and attend. Today's topic of retention yielded an excellent turnout, so thank you very much for attending. And with that, I'll now pass it off to Lois to get us started.
Thank you, Eric. A few tips for participating today. We have all the phone lines muted to reduce the background noise. And during the presentation, if you have a question or you want to share something, you can type a question into the chat panel. Just make sure that you send the chat to all participants. You can also raise your hand if you would like, and we can unmute your phone so you can share a question or thought verbally. And lastly, any resources that we do mention during the webinar and some additional ones will be available along with the recording of the webinar on the Supervisors Webinars page on the VISTA campus. You've already heard from both Eric and me. In addition, our colleague Amy Kanata from Education Northwest in Portland, Oregon is also joining us, and she's going to be monitoring the chat. We are delighted to have two guest speakers today. Jinlin Wu is a consultant, curriculum designer, and trainer. She is currently the Pacific Cluster Regional Training Leader for AmeriCorps VISTA. In that capacity, she oversees facilitation of the pre-service orientation for VISTA members and the orientation for supervisors. Jin has served both as a VISTA member, supervisor, and co-director of Human Relations and Diversity Training and Technical Assistance Center for CNCS. Teresa O'Halloran is the State Program Specialist in the Oregon State Office of CNCS. She has served there since 1991, overseeing VISTA and Senior Corps projects. VISTA has worked as a staff office person, both running sessions and fielding questions at over 100 VISTA PSOs and supervisor trainings. Please welcome both of our guest speakers. Here is what we hope you'll get out of this webinar today. You'll be able to recognize and describe the key factors for retaining VISTAs, begin to adopt strategies that energize your VISTAs and help sustain them throughout the year, and finally, successfully troubleshoot problems that come up as they occur rather than later, as many of us would probably like to do. So here's the plan for today. We'll spend a little time up front gaining insight into what's really going on, what the real issues are that are concerning your VISTA members. We'll present a scenario that's taken from the VISTA forums, which is where many VISTAs go to write about their frustrations and share their experiences, but some of the frustrations include problems with their supervisors. And then we're going to have you analyze the scenario situation and report on what you see. Then we'll introduce the 5 key factors for enhancing retention, and we're going to have each of our guest speakers elaborate from their own experiences on these factors. And lastly, we're going to open up the line for an open discussion where you can present your specific challenges and propose solutions. Let's get started with the presentation. There was a study commissioned by the Corporation for National and Community Service, CNCS, last year to look closely at the VISTA program. JBS International was seeking to understand and identify the knowledge, skills, and attitudes that individuals need to successfully complete the VISTA assignment description. In their report, they noted that 12% of VISTAs leave before their end of service. Why is this the case, and what can we do about this? What can be done? Let's try to find out together. Now I'm going to say something extremely obvious, but very, very important. There are always circumstances that will arise that you have absolutely no control over. As they say, life happens. People get sick, they have family emergencies, and so forth. However, most of the other problems that can arise during service, you definitely have some control over. These gray areas where you can actually have a great deal of impact. Let's see how this works in real life. Let's turn now to a scenario that was drawn from one of the VISTA forums. This young lady here, just 3 months into service, is very discouraged. I'll read you some of what she had to say. Quote, "My supervisor's boss is always spying on me. I have to be very careful about what sites I visit on the internet because that is monitored. Also, I have been warned about using my cell phone. I listen to Pandora, so I switch stations frequently and occasionally send a text. My supervisor told me today that although I can listen to music, she heard me laughing. I was listening to a podcast, and she told me to try not to laugh because others would think I'm off task. Is that ridiculous or what? Maybe I have the wrong mindset, but I don't believe I should have to put up with this for being in a volunteer position. There is a good chance that I will leave AmeriCorps Vista because although I took an oath, I didn't sign up for such a hostile work environment. And when I came into work today, my supervisor also said she's concerned about how late I'm coming in, not for something specific, but just because I need to make my 40-hour commitment. I've been here every day of the week from 9:30 to 4:30. It isn't enough for my supervisor because I'm not making my 40 hours a week. We all face the stress of financial strain with the living allowance, so the added stress in the office environment can be overwhelming. So now we're going to turn to the chat feature, and I would love for you all to answer the first question up here, which is, what do you think is the source of the problem? Remember to send the chat to all participants, and if you wish, you can address the other ones as well, what you think is the underlying cause and what other possible causes are. We'll have about 3 minutes for this. Expectations, yes. Misaligned goals.
I also see some themes here, Lois. This is Amy, around training.
Yeah.
And communication, obviously. I see an interesting one here, too, building relationships with the VISTA member.
Yeah, there's one here also about cultural differences as a possibility. Interesting.
There's a good one from Megan. She's saying, waiting too long to correct performance.
Mm-hmm. And here's another interesting one, having all on the same page before the VISTA even came to the role. Excellent. Generational differences. Mm-hmm.
I also see someone mention, which we heard from we'll hear more of, but check-ins, having check-ins and meetings on a regular basis.
Yes. Yes, excellent.
differing work styles.
Yeah, here's one from Claire. Maybe the VISTA is a little inexperienced, particularly about some of the things that are not acceptable in the workplace. Yeah, I see several people basically saying that there was a lack of communication of the expectations up front. Going from a college environment to an adult work world, yeah. All right, another. Go ahead.
Well, I was scrolling through the list because things were coming in fast as we opened up this chat, and I saw one about maybe the VISTA not feeling like her work is appreciated, which I thought was interesting, putting yourself in the VISTA's shoes.
Yes.
Shall we move on to the next one, Laura?
Yes, yes, I think let's move to the next one. Okay, now if you can address this question, is this something that could have been prevented? Why or why not? And we'll have another 3 minutes or so for this. Well, I see a lot of yeses. I see some interesting ones, maybe even some management training for the supervisor. Training on having difficult conversations. Yes. These are all right on.
And I think, some of these issues you may not think of until they happen to you. So it may be things you want to fold into your orientation for the next time as well. And I see a lot of themes coming out around training and orientation, which we know is very important to have those formal orientations. In addition to that, ongoing communication, and of course, relationships.
Yeah, one person mentioned that, yes, it probably could have been prevented, but, things can happen, and of course that's really true. The goal here is to try to just minimize the amount of those. This is also very interesting, also very important for the supervisor to be trained and oriented about the role of the VISTA.
And I appreciated that Emerald added that also staff need to know about the role of the VISTA, because obviously the VISTA will be working with everyone, and they need to know too.
Yeah. Another minute or so for this question. Here's a very interesting one, very important one. Work expectations need to be clearly defined and set goals in a timeline, but keep communication open and praise VISTA when they accomplish their goals. I think this is very, very important. Very, very important.
I agree, Lois. We know that, you know, being recognized for meeting your goals and doing good work, little things like that really make a big difference with retention.
Yes. Recognition is, in fact, very motivating. These are great. Why don't we move now on to the third question? When is the best time to address these issues? I think some people have alluded to various times in some of the comments that have come in already. There's consensus here. ASAP, at the beginning, and continuing.
I think it's also a good point that many people are saying it's a one-on-one conversation or a private conversation with that
Yes.
person versus maybe in the open office environment. And again, those regularly scheduled check-ins are important.
Yeah.
Nice language from Laura, too, to frame that conversation. I wouldn't want you to be misunderstood or misperceived by others in the office.
Yeah.
And Tam's point about also having that conversation with other VISTAs, too, so they know what the expectations are. That makes perfect sense. It might, like I said before, it could be something you permanently add in to your ongoing training, or maybe you have to have a specific check-in around an issue that's coming up that you see across the board for your entire group.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think we're ready to move on. We've identified 5 key factors that lead to retention among VISTA members. These factors can and should be treated and translated literally into specific actions on your part as VISTA supervisors. Whether you're working directly with VISTAs or managing VISTA projects, you all play a vital role in keeping the VISTAs informed, motivated, and energized. And you've all indicated this in the chats that we've already seen. We'll now explore the 5 factors in a bit more depth. Jen will begin by sharing her experiences and insights on recruiting the right person, the first factor. Jen?
Good morning, everyone. I'm happy to be speaking with you from Seattle and to talk about strategies that will help us increase the chances that our VISTAs fulfill their full term of service. So the first thing that came to mind was about recruiting the right person. And we know that the right person is not only a person whose skill set and experience line up with your bad needs. The right person is also somebody who aligns with supervisor needs, the culture of the organization and the community, and the context in which the service will happen. A lot of times we really want people to hear us when we talk about not doing warm body recruitment, and that you really want to, as much as possible, front load the service with efforts to make sure that we have the right match, a good match. And so beyond putting into the interview process, into the messaging, into the recruiting activities, information about the VAD and the needs that the organization has, you also want to just clarify the culture of the organization and the community and some information related to the supervisor style. So what we like to encourage you to think about is to take the interview process as one step towards retention. And in that interview process, not only sharing information, critical information, that will help the VISTA actually clarify for him or herself whether they're a good match, but also for you as the interview committee. For instance, what we know is that some supervisors prefer to supervise someone who shows a lot of initiative, doesn't require a lot of hand-holding, and is a self-starter. Well, if that is the case, then I think it would be important to use the interview process opportunity to clarify that so that both the supervisor and the member can reflect on whether this is a good match, whether I'm going to be the right fit for this service assignment. That also goes for information related to the culture and rhythm of the organization and the community. You know, we really need to look at the interview process as not only an opportunity to pose questions, but also to impart information that will help us find the right fit. What we also come to understand that beyond the VAD, that the VISTAs are bringing values and passions that matter. The more that we're able to tap into what might be going on, the better able we are to figure out whether we have a right match. So I'll give you an example. When we were recruiting for the America Reads initiative, you know, definitely we wanted members who understood infrastructure related to literacy development to help build capacity. So that's one way to look at it. But also what we noticed is for those organizations that screened and selected members who also had a passion for children and youth and also had a passion for reading, they just brought something extra to the service. So I think that our recruitment efforts, our screening efforts, our interviewing efforts can all contribute to whether or not we have the right match and also whether we're going to be able to retain folks because of that. Actually, we have a resource set up, and I'm going to actually turn it back over to Lois to talk about some recruitment information that we're making available. Lois?
Great. Yeah, thank you, Jen. In January of this year, last month, we presented a webinar on this very topic, excuse me, entitled Recruitment, Attracting Successful VISTAs. You can review this recording, the recording of this webinar, which is available now on the VISTA campus in the Supervisors Webinars page. You can download and download the useful, very useful resources that were provided to our participants. Amy, maybe you can share the link to that in the chat?
Yeah, I went ahead and pasted the link into the chat, and the webinar page that we are sending you to is also your source for all the recordings, so that's where this recording will be posted along with the resources. And I think folks found it really valuable to access the recruitment resources, especially since there are many templates on there, including timelines and tracking tools that are set up as Excel documents that you can download and use.
Now let's turn to the second factor of the 5 factors, and Teresa is going to tackle this one. Teresa?
Hi. So as we all discussed and noticed in the chat, communication is really super important, and clear, direct communication is just vital. But you want to communicate not just the goals and the VAD, but really look to the member's resume and what experience they have to help guide you on whether or not you need to give them more details on activities, specific tasks. And even though it's really tempting, if the member comes to your site and you find that they have skills beyond what's listed in the VAD, don't just load them up with a lot of extra duties and other things. Really stick to that VAD. Now, if the VAD needs to be modified, you can contact your state office and modify the VAD to add a few skills here or there, possibly, depending on what your state office is in agreement with. But you don't want to just, because the more you pull them off onto other things, the less time they have to focus on what they were there, and that can also cause conflict in communication. When you're doing your orientation, your on-site orientation that everybody has to do, you want to be sure to explain your workplace environment and community cultures. Make sure the VISTA really understands what your office policies are, and if you can, even maybe some of the unspoken policies that we all seem to have that help people navigate. And you can look, again, to their resume to see how much experience they have in office environments to help guide you on maybe if you need to go a little overboard on explaining about office environments, or maybe you don't have to do as much. Then for those projects that have sites that are large, statewide, even multiple state entities, you want to make sure that the communication that your sites are giving to the members is in direct communication, it's directly in line with the communication you want to give. Often there are miscommunications, and sometimes that happens between the site and the overall supervisor, overall project. One example of this, which is like it sticks out in my brain so much because it became a big problem. We had a VISTA project, and they had a site. The local site, during the interview process, told the members that they could have an outside job in addition to their VISTA service. And so the members came, they got another job, and they were a part of the team. The team, other members complained and said, hey, wait a minute, we can't have a job. That's against regulation. Caused huge conflict. The project overall supervisor did not want to, she felt she was being disloyal to the site by saying something that was in direct disagreement with the local site supervisor. And so she ignored the issue until it really blew up, and I had to come down in the middle of the team meeting and just intervene. So take care of it as soon as the issue arises, and make sure your communication with your sites is it's directly related. Jen, sorry about that. Your turn.
No problem. So our third factor, when we think about it, is really about how well our VISTAs are connected to the larger vision. What we know is VISTAs come to service for many different reasons. No matter what the reason is, if they feel that their service contributes to a greater good, important mission or vision, we know that their service is different and that their probability of staying with us for their full year of service is greater. So what we want you to really take the time to do is to infuse those supervisory conferences in an ongoing manner about the dream piece, about the improved condition. What we know is it's very easy for a VISTA to get mired in the details of the VAD and get discouraged. And when at PSO we talk to them about that actually the typical cycle is a series of pits and peaks that, you know, if you hang in there through the pits, it'll continue on. But what we really know is that when VISTAs are grounded in the issue areas, they come to really understand the importance of the mission and vision of the organization. It just works that much better. I can draw from my own personal experience. When I served in the late 60s, in the first 3 months of my service, I was tasked to organize a community meeting around affordable housing. And I did about 8 weeks of work and prepared a bilingual meeting, community meeting, and only 7 members showed up. And I really thought I was not the right VISTA for the community and for this particular assignment. And I went to my next supervisory conference very discouraged and really ready to pack my bags and return home. And my supervisor just listened and then shared with me some context that I needed to hear. And he said, you know, where you have room to bolt, I have room, I have cause to celebrate, because I was here 17 years before you, and this is the first time that I've heard that 7 community residents sat together and discussed for 2 hours affordable housing in our community. So, you know, and change is slow to happen, and you need to understand that you know, what you consider a failure is really what I consider a success. So he was able to continually feed me information that helped me understand the importance of the service that I was doing, and that really definitely contributed to me not packing my bags and staying. One last thing that I want to share real quickly is that now I've taken that wisdom and rolled it into the way we prepare our supervisors and members. So when I'm responsible for on-site orientation, I actually do a drawing activity and ask members to work with their supervisors to draw what they consider to be the mission and vision of their VAD and their role in that. And I have them first do it separately and then meet up and partner and talk about their images and what was shared and what was different about the way they understood it. But I think that sometimes when you're talking vision, a picture really helps. So maybe that's a strategy that other folks might consider using. Right now I'm going to hand it back to Lois to tell us.
Thank you, Jen. Before we move on to the 4th factor, I want to share with you another finding of the JBS report that I previously talked about. Regular one-on-one VISTA supervisor meetings lead to retention. Teresa is now going to expand on this important responsibility of all supervisors.
Hi. So, sorry if I was talking too quietly before. I thought I was yelling. I'm in the office alone, so I can speak as loud as you need me to. Trust me, yeah. Anyway, you really want to set up initial, regular, ongoing meetings. It's really easy to get busy and get distracted onto other things, but you do not want to miss more than one of those regular meetings. When the member first starts during their orientation, have an established time, date, everything to meet with that member. That regular meeting, it gives you a chance to ensure your member's going in the right direction, gives the member an avenue for feedback and to let you know, you know, this isn't working, this person might not be meeting with me. You can help to resolve those issues right at the beginning. It also gives you an avenue as time goes by to actually recognize what they've achieved. And one really good thing that seems to work for a lot of members is to tell them to keep either a folder on their desk or on their desktop and slip things into that during the week as time, you know, and bring that folder or bring those items to your meeting. You can go through, discuss things. It gives you something to start the discussion. And it also gives them a chance to reflect and keep those things in that folder all through their service. At the 6-month point, you can use it for reflection of how much they've accomplished. And at the end of the year, they can use those items to build their resume, which is really helpful too. If you're lucky and you have a VISTA leader, yay, because leaders often do help with that communication. If you're at an intermediary site, you want to be sure that and make sure that local site supervisor's sticking to the commitment. When you do your application, you send to the state office how often you're going to meet with members, what your supervisory commitment is. And when you stick to that, that's when we see successes. When things start to fall down, often it is that time is not committed to. And if you have sites they should also be sticking to that commitment. They should have told you what they're going to be reviewing, how often they're going to meet, and that they're sticking to that commitment also. Jen, I think it's back to you, or Lois?
It's to me. Thank
okay.
you. Thank you, Teresa. Many people, including supervisors, have a difficult time dealing with conflict. Some people will do anything to avoid it. Others will be very accommodating. Some people can become abrupt and aggressive. But conflict really doesn't have to be scary, and it doesn't have to lead to bad conclusions. It just depends on how you approach it and how you handle it. First, Teresa and then Jen are going to share their thoughts about troubleshooting problems. Teresa?
Okay, so typical problems are, of course, communication, lack of clarity. But also there can be issues with other site staff, not just the sites, but also at your project, other staff members not being clear on what the member's there to do. So really make sure that everybody's clear on what the member can and can't do, the non-direct service, things like that. Also, you want to make sure that even if you have sites, even if you have to create a script for them or interview questions, make sure that your sites aren't overselling the project or overselling their site in order to get a member. In areas where it's hard to recruit, we see that more often. And you really, really don't want to oversell. Make sure be blunt. That's okay, because that way everybody knows what it is and what they want to do. You don't want to, like I was talking about before with my supervisor, take care of those problems as soon as they arise. Don't let it snowball. Don't let it become bigger and bigger and bigger. So, and you're not being disloyal to your site if you have to go to a member and say, yeah, what they promised, that's we can't stick to that. And you want to communicate with the member and wade through their emotional words. A lot of times you'll hear a lot of emotion, hurt, frustration. Try and get to what's really the meat of the issue. What's really going on there? So I think, Jen, you get to talk about typical problems.
Well, I'm going to talk about following your gut. I think in our experience, and when we're at crisis proportions and we track it back, almost on reports that there were signs, there was a feeling, I had a sense of it. And so what we're really encouraging everyone to think about is not burying your head in the sand and really looking at conflicts as a really opportunity to meet needs, improve conditions, that here we're confronted with some information that tells us that everything could be better. In terms of sticking a person's head in the sand, as a supervisor, as a busy one, I know that when I'm VISTAs, a habit that I developed that maybe other people might find useful is that I really try now not to schedule myself so closely, so that after I have a supervisory conference, I actually have time to reflect and make some notes to myself so that I do some follow-up, because the signs are there. My gut tells me something and I need to listen to it. So at least once a month, I try to get a pulse on the VISTA related to these 5 things. 1, the bad progress. 2, how the VISTA is doing with his or her service. How they're adjusting to the organization and community culture. What his or her relationship is with me or with others. And then this related to, do I see growth related to the issue area? So, if I this year take down, notes related to that, then and what I need to follow up on. Good, that's great, and I pat everyone on the back. If it's, we have some problems here, there's something that's not quite right, then I need to follow up on that. But if I don't make notes to myself right after the supervisory conference and right after I've gotten a chance to collect data and get an impression, sometimes it just falls away and I lose it off my list. So I would encourage you to do that. Another thing in terms of troubleshooting, I think it's really healthy to talk about conflict resolution before any of it arises. So you want to talk about conflict resolution via the lens of the organization, the lens of the community, and also your personal style and preference and what the VISTA members' personal style and preference related to it. And I think it's also a really healthy idea to sit and talk about what ifs and come up with contingency plans. I think the more that we can anticipate that we're going to have conflicts, but we've already thought about how we might handle them together, I think it works just a whole lot better. Lois?
Great. Thank you, Jen. Now I'd like to point you to a comprehensive report that was created by a VISTA Leader Action Learning Team on managing conflict. The Action Learning Team was a small group of leaders who investigated this topic over the course of 4 months, and they created this report just for the VISTA community. The report covers many, many aspects of handling conflict, such as actually what is conflict, the different stages of conflict, why it's so hard, some common approaches for handling conflict, positives and negatives, and they include some case studies and many, many more insights that I think you would find very, very helpful. We will be providing a link to this resource, which is available on the VISTA campus at the conclusion of the webinar, and it's really worth exploring this in detail. You'll get a lot of good tips and insights from it. Another tip for VISTAs who may be new to service and feeling alone or disconnected, I know some people have alluded to that situation, you can support them by steering them towards opportunities to get more involved with the larger service community. There's a section on the VISTA campus called Connect with VISTAs, and this page they'll find VISTA forums, which I had talked about earlier, where I got the scenario. There's a VISTA map where they can explore, locate VISTAs in all parts of the country. There's access to a number of social media sites, and also meetups and how to get involved, how to set up meetups, or how to participate in other meetups in your local area. These sites are great outlets for and an opportunity for VISTAs to expand their horizons and connect with others. So now let's open this webinar up for questions and answers, and we'd like you to ask a question and type it into the chat panel, sending it again to all participants. Or if you prefer and you want to talk verbally, raise your hand and we'll unmute your phone and you can ask the question directly.
Lois, earlier there was a question about what to put in the folder, and I think Eric answered that. I noticed Teresa already put up some tips that may not have gotten to all of the attendees, so I'm going to copy those and paste them into the chat now.
Great. Excellent. A question from Sandra. This webinar will be on the supervisor's webinar page. There will be a recording of it and a transcript of it within about 48 hours of today.
And just to add to that, this is Amy. We will email you when that's posted, so you'll get an email from VISTA that lets you know that all the materials and the recording have been posted. So it'll jog your memory for those of you that probably have very long to-do lists, which is probably everyone.
And I also wanted to just add that when you ask your questions, if you want to direct it specifically to Jen or Teresa or just the panel in general, let us know because everyone is available to respond. There is a question from David about navigating conflict or challenges around the softer issues. I do suggest taking a look at the Managing Conflict, the Action Learning Team project. It really deals with a very, very broad range of issues, including those. So I think you'll find that helpful.
And this is Eric. I want to make sure there was an earlier question from Megan about retention rates of national recruits versus local recruits. Here at VISTA headquarters, we can pull just about data on anything, so we can certainly get that data, and I can write that down, and maybe we can include that in the email that goes out. We can certainly pull that information based on people we know who are recruiting nationally versus local recruits. So thank you for that question.
There was another question early when Jen was speaking about the VAD and vision activity. And the question was, could you provide a little more detail about that, Jen? And also, it's my understanding we'll be posting a copy of that activity with the recording. But maybe, Jen, if you could talk a little bit more about the VAD and vision activity, that would be helpful.
Yeah, actually, so when they do them separately, and they actually are asked to do drawings and use limited, words, then they sit together to clarify their shared understanding of what the vision is, what the role of the VISTA in that vision, and the VAD. And then actually a second part of that activity is during on-site orientation and training, we actually have them craft a message, much like an elevator speech, so that they can engage community members with it. So using a picture, they take 3 minutes and they actually share the vision of the work, what the role in that is, and the supervisors actually shadowing the member as they practice with other pairs of members and supervisors. And we found it to be really, really grounding for everyone. And that also sets the relationship up for a conversation around the vision periodically.
Thank you, Jen. Terrence Collins also had a question. The message reads, our VISTAs are going through a valley right now, not feeling that they're impacting the work or having a great enough voice. Any thoughts on dealing with that from any of our panelists?
This is Jen again, and I think that also what helps is that periodically at meetings that we bring in community members to talk about the service and that issue area, and so that we're actually, inviting our members to hear testimonies by community members about the impact that that project, that program has on their lives. I think that sometimes when we're losing our way, someone else telling their story about the impact of that service on their lives really can refresh me and help me see the larger picture again.
Absolutely.
I see a comment here, a question here from Mary Matthews. Does CNCS offer an online conflict resolution training for VISTA members? I am not sure about that. Eric, are you aware of that?
As of right now, we do not offer any such type of training. However, as Amy and Lois both alluded to and spoke about, we do offer lots of training and opportunity on the VISTA campus, so a suggestion like that is certainly something we can look into and look at the feasibility of it, but it would be a great option to do. So I'll make a note and bring that to my team and see what we can do to enhance and add trainings like that and other suggestions you have to the VISTA campus and other places.
Great. Yeah, I think that's a very a good idea, very important issue.
Lorena Martinez was asking about structures that we could recommend for checking in with VISTAs. She likes the idea of having quick pulse check-ins and also reflections, but do we have any other specific strategies for check-in?
This is Teresa. Maybe take her out for coffee, or if you have a really friendly staff member, yeah, you can maybe connect them up for coffee time, or
Can I chime in too?
yeah,
Sure.
please help me.
Sure. You know, in terms of meeting process and quick check-ins, lots of times it's fun to share the responsibility for structuring the check-in, and we've used things like using medicine wheel, talking about, you know, those 4 quadrants of your wellness. We've used pits and peaks. We've used metaphors for movies and book titles. I was with an NCCC group not so long ago, and they said, grab how you're feeling right now in a dessert. And 30 of us checked in around, you know, the dessert and how we were feeling. But it can be fun and interesting, but it allows you to get some insights in. I think the more varied they are, it can be a sound, a smell, it can be an image that makes it interesting, as well as you get a sense of where they are.
As long as
you
don't overdo it. My little sister had a boss who would come in every day and say, "What weather are you?" And she said after about 3 weeks, she wanted to smack him upside the head. So, you know, don't overdo it though, too. You can do quick check-ins, you know, and use things to start the conversation, but hopefully after a while you've developed a good enough, you really developed that rapport with your member, where you can just come in and say, "Hey, how was your weekend?" and really and start with the check-in, or how was that meeting? How did that work? How'd you feel about it? You know, what was the reception? Instead of, you know, hopefully you've developed the rapport within, you know, after the first 4 months.
Tymberlee Williams says she has her hand raised. Can we open up her line and have her ask a question?
Sure. This is Amy. Let me just work on that, Kimberly. We have a couple other questions queued up in the chat panel. So one of them is, and Kimberly, I'm not seeing your name in the actual participant list, so if you wouldn't mind typing it into the chat, that would help, and then we can get to your question. So there was a question about, from Tina, and it was a little while back. We have lots of really great questions, and she wanted to know, what are tips for managing a VISTA who constantly disagrees with you and with the vision of the program? This is a tough one, I think.
Yeah.
Any ideas?
You know, because usually it's the organization's vision that your service and your VAD connect to. So I think that the project plan gives you some insights, but that's odd that he or she would be disagreeing with what the organization has put out. I think we may have a disagreement around how you build the capacity, and some of our VISTAs are really opinionated, and I know that at PSO we do our best to make sure that people are joining their organizations, you know, as partners in the work and not as the answer or, yeah, so that is a tough situation.
And sometimes there's no way, to me that's one of those that the person probably came across during their interview as an expert, and sometimes you just don't catch those. And that's I put those in there was no way to change this because this person came in with a preconceived notion of what the right thing to do was, and nothing but their right thing was going to make it, you know, was going to work. So sometimes you just don't catch all of them, and that's unfortunate.
So I want to apologize to Tymberlee Williams, who I couldn't find her name in the list because I misheard her name. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute you, Tymberlee, so you can ask your question verbally. Okay, go ahead, Tymberlee.
Thank you, Amy. I get that all the time. No problem. Well, my question is this. I have a challenge. We have 3 AmeriCorps VISTAs who we had them seated in the same office space with each other because we wanted them to bond as a team. Well, they've done such a great job as bonding as a team that it seems as though I'm having trouble connecting with them as a group. So we decided to meet with them as supervisors weekly as a team group. And there was a great information today to meet one-on-one. I just wonder if there's any recommendations. I don't want to over-meet with them, but I'm having trouble getting them. There's a disconnect between the VISTAs and the staff. Their momentum, they're doing the work, but it just seems like it's us against them. And I'm trying to bridge that to let them know that even though they're part of our team, any recommendations to help with that, the bonding of that gap?
Jen?
Yeah,
Jen or Teresa?
Well, I might try actually, sitting them down. Well, first of all, I would definitely at least once a month meet with them one-on-one. Meeting as a team is great, but they do need the one-on-one contact. But then I also would just say, look, our hope was that you would coalesce and become this really cohesive team. But, the upside and downside of every strategy is that what I want to share with you is that some of the feedback I've been getting is that you're almost like a unified block, and and other people don't feel like they can penetrate it. And so let's sit together and figure out how we can, take down that barrier that is people's perceptions, because I think it's going to compromise your ability to help build capacity here. So I think I would just be honest and say, let's work together to figure out, like within the next 2 months, what might be our mini plan in terms of taking down that barrier that people are perceiving.
And I would wonder if you have enough staff to assign an individual mentor of your staff to each of the members to try and disintegrate that us against them kind of mentality. So they've got their one-on-one person, and it almost weaves them into the team.
Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So this is Amy, and I'm looking at the Q&A panel, and we have quite a few questions queued up. So I know that we're about a minute until the close of the session formally, but if folks are interested in staying on for maybe 10 or 15 more minutes to try to answer some more questions, we're happy to do that. I just wanted to let you know that if you do have to go, we just encourage you to complete the evaluation and join us for our next session. And we can continue with Q&A if that's okay with everyone. Lois, does that work for you?
Yeah, that's fine. And I think our panelists can stay for a few extra minutes, too.
Absolutely.
Jen and Teresa?
Yeah, I can stay like 10. I do have another meeting, but we're good.
Okay, great. Before we go into that, I just want to announce our next webinar, just so you're aware of it. It is coming up on Tuesday, March 18th, 2014, and it's going to be about the role of the sub-site supervisors, a mini supervisor orientation. So keep that in mind, and if you have to sign off now, thank you so much for spending this hour with us. Complete the evaluation, and we will be posting this webinar and some resources on the VISTA Supervisors page shortly.
Okay, so we had a question from Joe, and he wanted to know, and maybe some of our participants have ideas too, if we have any tips for advising VISTAs and other AmeriCorps members on superficial but important things such as email etiquette and personal appearance without necessarily putting together a big training. Anybody have tips or resources they could share on this?
Personally, well, for me, I would create something and give it to your candidates during the recruitment process. I mean, I would do it right up front and find those things that, you know, if your organization has a policy that, you know, you're in a government, like with us, you're in a government organization, every single one of your emails is scanned for certain keywords. That's good to know. I had a site supervisor call me saying she wanted to remove the member because the member wore sneakers to work, and that just didn't gel in their organization. I wouldn't have thought of that. I had no idea. You know, there's some really key things. What's infrequent use? How is that of the computer? Can you use it during your lunch? Can you use it after work? If you do, are there certain sites you really absolutely should not do? Like the member at a restore that was surfing porn on the computers. You know, there's some things that just you think, oh, I don't need to say that. Yeah, you need to say it. Have your policy document and say, these are the things that are okay. This is what infrequent use is. Have something set. And if you already have those for your staff, share them with your recruitment candidates, with all the information about your organization.
I'm just going to chime in real quickly. I agree. If you have a policies and procedures manual, you know, just share that with the member candidate so that as she or he peruses it, if they see that, oh, this is something that I don't think I want to live with, they can self-select out, you know, that maybe this isn't the right match. But those are not, you know, superficial things. I mean, how we communicate and how people perceive it is really important. So what we know is that a lot of the soft skills that we're identifying are actually the critical skills that either make for effective service or not.
And if it's like how their tone is in certain communications, like emails, have somebody with yourself or somebody within your organization review a couple of the emails before they start communicating with the public, and maybe use that as an opportunity to mentor them in how professional communications and emails really should go out because it's representing your organization.
Thank you. And this is Amy. You know, when that question came up, it made me think about some of the work readiness resources that we often put together for young people. So I'm guessing that you may be able to find some tip sheets or something like that pretty easily online because it's sort of those work readiness skills around email and appearance. I'm guessing a good Google search and you may be able to find something you can adapt. So I think we probably have time for one more question. There's one from Sandra that was way up in the list early on. And Sandra wanted to know if you had any ideas on how to navigate potential disabilities around social interaction, such as peer-to-peer interaction and supervisor-to-member interaction. Another tough one.
I don't understand why the disabilities. That's throwing me off.
Maybe Sandra could elaborate. I'll see if I can unmute her. Sandra, I'm going to unmute you, so prepare. Are you there, Sandra? Can you elaborate on your question for us? Okay, so I'm not sure Sandra's comfortable doing that, so we'll just go ahead and move on. Oh, yes. Okay, so she's posted in the chat. A potential disability. Okay. Hold on. Let me unmute you again. I got your message. Okay, Sandra, you're online. So far, we're not hearing your voice. Maybe you're muted on your end.
Well,
okay, so
it looks like what she's saying is one that might not be known to the member. So maybe a non-disclosed disability, and you can't. Disabilities are really touchy because you cannot, unless somebody self-discloses that they have a disability, you can't address it as a disability. You have to treat them the same as you would any other member. I had a leader once who would talk, and then every once in a while he would just drop the sentence and didn't know why, and then just becoming friends with him and getting to know him over the year, it turned out he was working in a restaurant and had a cast iron frying pan dropped on his head. And he knew that there was something going on, but he didn't know, and he didn't know how to express it as a disability. And so once we knew, and then once he started openly talking about what it was, then we could talk about where to go and how to, like, you know, come up with a non-verbal signal, like, you did it again, you dropped your sentence. And then he would notice he had to start his sentence over again in order to complete the thought. But until it's disclosed, you can't treat it as a disability. You just have to treat them the same as you would be treating any of your other members. Jen, do you have any other ideas?
I think I agree with you, Teresa, in terms of your response, and I think I need more information so that I can, you know, answer appropriately.
So this is Amy, and we're at about 8 minutes past the hour, and we have the questions have slowed down quite a bit. So I'm going to turn it back over to Lois to officially end the session.
Thank you, Amy. Well, I just wanted to thank everyone once again for participating in this webinar and sharing your experiences and sharing your concerns and letting us get some insight into what's going on in your experiences. We encourage you to continue this conversation through the VISTA Supervisor Cafe Forum. You need an account to do this. I'm not sure if all supervisors are aware of this. It's in the Connect with Supervisors area of the campus. You do need an account, and you can create one to participate in the forums. You need to manually subscribe to the forum in order to receive email alerts when the new message is posted. But I encourage you to continue this conversation. You have a lot to share with one another, and we hope that you will do this. And again, thank you so much. We will be posting the recording of this webinar and some resources as soon as we can. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.